Good evening, viewers. Here I come again with another new episode of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. Viewers, today I would like to ask you, do you know the gateway to shaping your personalities or build your perceptions of life? Well, I'll make that easier for you. Certain life experiences in our life brings out our true emotions. The meaning of life is discovered in the experience. Experiences that live on in your memories for good or bad. Experiences is the beginning of expertise. Placing it simply, in the words of Julius Caesar, experience is the teacher of all things. Our guest today comes with expertise both in the academic as well as administrative matters. He is one of the senior most eligible professors of the medical faculty in the government sector, having served Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences as a registrar for 2 terms. He is now the Vice-Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Bengaluru, and has just given up that post. Let's welcome Dr. S Sacchidanand to the show. Viewers, it's so good to have you on the show, Dr. Sacchidanand.
Thank you so much.
I have always admired you for 2 things, Dr. Sacchidanand. One, being in the government sector and also in the private sector, you've worn 2 hats. One, you've had the kind of concern for students, because you've been in the private sector. You carry the kind of the concern for students, and you never try to throw students out of your room very quickly, and yet you are able to have the efficiency of having 3-4 people sit in front of you, and you will be able to attend all of them and not tell everyone to walk out of the room just because somebody else has walked into the room. And that smile on your face is so characteristic of you. How do you manage to take all this thing and yet go back in the evening and practice with those patients? That amazes me. So what is this character of patience and how did you develop this?
I should say I was very lucky to have the best of both the worlds, both being in the government sector as well as in the private sector in my own free time. It's thing that you need to develop. This multitasking has to be developed very patiently, very efficiently over a period of time. It doesn't just occur. When you take up a job, I feel you should be always very truthful to the job, very faithful to the job. Here, when I took up an assignment in the university, and as all of you know, that university is meant for students and for faculty, so you need to listen to them. There must be a system which students can approach and then give their grievances. But if the top man is reachable to them, if he is available to them, students feel that much comfortable. I had all the, I should say, privilege of directly talking to hundreds of students and listening to them. In a way, when I did that, I came to know the deficiencies in the system and I could rectify that. So that way I was very happy to be connected to students always.
Also, just going back, in lighter vein, I would say that maybe all these patients came because you married a gynecologist. Is that right?
You're scoring a brownie point there. Yes, my wife is a gynecologist. And of course, initial periods of her practice, I used to accompany her and be with her whenever she went for a cesarean or for a gynec operation. So yes, it made me more patient there. I supported her.
Good. That's very interesting. So you come from a family of renowned medical professionals. Can you say something about your family?
In fact, I was the first doctor in the family. My cousins, elder cousins were all engineers, so I became the first doctor in my entire family. And then of course after that many have followed. My wife is a gynecologist, my daughter is a dermatologist, elder one, Dr. Sujala. Dr. Jalajakshi, of course you know her, she is a gynecologist. Then my elder son-in-law, Dr. Prasanna, is an orthopedician. My second daughter, Dr. Prajwala, is a gynecologist, and my son-in-law is also a gynecologist, Dr. Kiran. So we are now 6 doctors in the family, and my parents were not doctors. As I said, I was the first doctor in the family, so my mother was a teacher, my father was in railways and as a commercial clerk. So that's how things were. But being the first doctor in the family gave me a lot of responsibilities, and I could fulfill a lot of those. Now sitting back and thinking after my retirement, I feel very satisfied man, very, I could achieve so many things what I had aspired for. So getting into medical profession gave me a lot of opportunities to achieve whatever I wished for.
But do you think, how did you get into dermatology? Because there's a saying that what cannot be cured must be endured, and that is very apt to the dermatology profession. Is that what gave you that kind of skill of endurance into a government profession?
Throughout my school life and my college life, I was one of the top students in the class. So I could have chosen any field I wanted. So during 1980s, 83, 84, when I got into post-graduation, I could have got any subject because I had good marks. But I chose dermatology at that point of time, and people used to laugh at it because that was a subject which was not come into limelight at that point of time. I thought if I could choose a path which is something different from what regularly is chosen by others, I could achieve something. So that made me think, that dermatology is a field which has got great potential. It's going to come up in the next future days, and that's why I chose dermatology. And I could achieve a lot through dermatology.
Do you think, again, getting back into the private practice and then getting into the healthcare system, into the university, I've always admired that we have a very wonderful medical university that Karnataka can be very proud of, particularly the fellowship system that you actually brought about. And then you actually even told the MCI you had quite a bit of an altercation with the MCI because they did not want it to sort of clash with the MCH and the DM that they had actually done. And then you said, let's make it 1.5 years rather than 2 years and 3 years. So that was a very good plan that you put across, but you didn't actually buckle down and say that we will not do it. So looking at the number of fellowships, you actually opened another window of opportunity for those who had just a diploma, for example, or those who had experience but did not have a degree to that. You provided that window. You should be a very proud man to see so many people doing the fellowship today with curriculum. I think, how does that feel?
First of all, concept of medical university is a wonderful thing, health university, which our state started off very early. In fact, this is the third state to start a state health university after the MGR and NTR universities. So Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences is a wonderful platform where we could achieve so many things. As you rightly mentioned, formal education as per the apex bodies is one. Giving MD, MS and DMD, MCH and all is a common thing. But Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences was always ahead of its time, thinking about the future. It started the fellowship programs. Fellowship programs are wonderful programs where the students who have done diplomas or MD could not get much exposure during their course, can develop their skills. Because there is a large gap between what is taught in the medical colleges and what exactly the society needs. The societal demands are much more. So understanding these gaps, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences started fellowship programs in almost all the clinical subjects, and that gave an opportunity for many students. It was a win-win situation. The students were getting more skills. The institutions which were running these fellowship courses got manpower and also improved their services. And the university also established good curriculum and then set a pattern into how these fellowship programs should be conducted. But it lacked one thing, as you rightly mentioned, MCA didn't recognize that. But that doesn't stop us from this, because in our own objectives, furthering the skills and development, furthering the education is a part and parcel of university objective. So that we could achieve. And there was since it was a win-win situation and everything was controlled in a way a formal education is being given, like in MDMS. So these fellowships were a huge hit. I'm sure in the last 15 years, I'm proud to say Rajiv Gandhi University has already crossed 75 fellowship programs.
Excellent,
excellent. We're running 75 programs with 4 admissions in each year. So at any given point of time, 300 students will be undergoing fellowship programs after their post-graduation. And this has given them a lot of opportunities to develop their skills, and they are in great demand. Once they finish and go, they'll be that much more confident, they'll be much more knowledgeable and raring to go. And they are much better off than the ordinary run-of-the-mills.
Which again brings to my concern here, sir, that once you do your MD, look at about say 5.5 years of MBBS, okay, and then they come in as graduates, then they become postgraduates, and then now you bring in a kind of a subspecialty. So the MDs are now saying, then why did we do MD? We were considered as specialists. Then after that you go and do subspecialization, and then after that you go back and say, where does the MD actually stand? So they are at the crossroads now. They become absolutely like a GP. So what do you feel, sir? Do you think that you have created another cadre of persons who, being an MD, becomes a Trishanku, like a general medicine MD or an MD in obstetrics and gynae? Don't you think that the 2 years of an MD, maybe for example in an obstetrics and gynae, could have actually taken about 6 months of that to do some subspecialty in that particular year and given a special paper in that particular year, rather than having to go and do a subspecialty again and again spend another year and a half? What do you say, sir?
You're talking something about, revamping of the whole system itself.
Yes, something like that, sir.
Bringing some changes wherein the student
Absolutely.
can have a choice of his own.
Absolutely.
And do a subspecialty. What I feel is we should have a basic degree, because for the student, if he wants to opt out and then start his practice and then settle down in life, he should have a basic degree.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing. So that to that extent, MD and MS would fulfill that desire. But I would look at this way: if we start subspecialties, it adds on to that subject. The subject starts growing. For example, if you take gynecology, we have now fertility, we have reproductive medicine, we have laparoscopy, minimal invasive surgeries. So those are all add-ons which has enriched the subject. For example, dermatology, if I take my own subject, we have dermatosurgery, we have aesthetic dermatology, we have dermatopathology, we have photodermatology, we have oncodermatology. So these are all subspecialties which have enriched the subject, but also given opportunities for students to branch out. Once they have a basic degree like an MD or MS, then they can think of further. Of course, the study period extends, the settling time also extends, and that's how the field is. But I feel very honestly that subspecialties keep on adding to the subject and enriches the subject. So we should give an opportunity for students to choose once they have a basic degree. As you wanted to point out and say that it should be included in the MD curriculum itself.
So my thinking was a doctor never starts earning, because all his life he is doing subspecialties. Because if you look at a software engineer, by the time he is 22 or 23, look at his pay packet and look at a doctor's pay packet. And if you look at a person like who's MD, he was considered to be a consultant, and now he becomes like a GP. And then every patient who comes to a doctor says, are you a subspecialist? Okay, so what happens to this MD is after the 3 years, after he passes out of his MBBS, he is still studying, and then he gets married, and then everyone says, how much are you earning? And then he goes again and subspecialty, again he's working under somebody. So what I felt was, under all these branches, if they get another 6 months exposure, at least they can practice that branch, and then if they want to go and do 10 others, I don't mind. The contention was, give them something in that itself as a sabbatical for 6 months, and then go ahead. It only gives them that little bit that in that MD, and then put a small thing with a subspecialization of something. It really makes it better for these MD doctors, because I felt that doctors are being harassed everywhere. You go on putting a whole lot of things in the MBBS, and then you make it bigger and bigger, and at the end of it, 90% of what you learn in MBBS you don't actually use in MD.
In practice. That's true.
Do you agree with me or
true.
not?
This could be thought of, because we can start identifying students to choose their own field at a very early time period. That's a nice thing to go. But as you know, ma'am, that specialization is something which we employ to learn more and more things about less and less things. Ultimately we become focused about a particular thing, maybe laparoscopy, maybe dermatopathology, maybe dermatosurgery, or even trichology for that matter. That sort of a thing. As you rightly said, a 6 months window can be created within the MDMS for them to develop that interest. During that period, let them focus and see that they have interest in that particular subject, and later on specialize in that with fellowships or whatever it is. So
That
that
is
way,
what
the
I felt.
sensitizing individuals.
Sensitizing them enough. Because see, for example, they get 2 months in anesthesia, 2 months in preventive and social medicine, community medicine and things. Instead of that, if you just put 6 months of that and give them a specialty of their choice, that itself, because I don't think any gynecologist is going to sit and do community medicine, for example, or anesthesia, for example. So I felt that, I mean, we have to move with times and we have to give them that kind of a specialty, because that will be a teaser for them. And
Correct.
that, they know what exactly it
They
is.
can choose their career.
Absolutely, because that is something I have always been thinking about and saying, yes, this is what
I think
we
the
need
new
to do.
National Medical Commission is now thinking about those things. They are introducing what is called district residency program. District residency program is where 3 months they go to the districts and then try to focus their attention on subject that they are interested in. If they can tailor it like that, I think that purpose is served. What you rightly mentioned now, the students can get sensitized in the field that they want to take their career up.
Another thing which I would, just going again into the Rajiv Gandhi, there were many times that I have observed you, sir, that irrespective what time of the day it was, once you got into that chamber, you never looked at the clock. You always were there smiling, whether it was the office boy or whether it was anybody coming in. You would say, please be seated, and then you would attend to it, and then you would sign on those things, and then you would still call the other person who's waiting outside and ask them their this thing. And at least 4 or 5 people, you were attending to them simultaneously. How was that possible?
I always thought any person who comes to my chamber has some problem with him. That's why he's coming. Otherwise, why should he come and meet me at all? So I always welcomed, be it an attender or an official or a politician. If he's coming to my chamber, he's got some problem. And I always thought that's an opportunity for me to, try to solve that issue, or rather, maybe I'm learning something from them, something new. So many a times, the deficiencies were pointed out by them. So that helped me to correct something in the system. That's one thing. Secondly, if I can solve a problem which they couldn't otherwise got it solved elsewhere in the system, they come to me directly. So it's time for me to look into that and give a rightful solution to that. Otherwise, why would they come and see a Vice-Chancellor? If they have got the solution and answer at a lower level itself, they wouldn't have come to me. So the very reason that they come to me is with some hope that their problem would be solved. So, and a Vice-Chancellor should have that open mind to accept and try to have that mind to solve the issues, rather than shoo away the people, shun away, and build a fort in front of you so that nobody would come to you. So that's not them, and that's the reason. The more I used to interact with the individuals, I gained a lot.
That is true. But also another thing that I've noticed as well this thing is, are there any anecdotes that you can think of where you've really felt that you've learned from students something that you had never learned before, and these students have really touched you in a way? Some examples that you can give without mentioning names, that it's really made a difference to you.
Normally, students are very particularly concerned with the university only during the time of exams. They come to the university with some genuine reasons also, maybe due to circumstantial problems, for example, COVID. So even before the students who came to the university asking us to postpone the exam, we had already done it. So when they came, they had nothing to speak at all. They said, sir, you already thought of and you have done it. Because I had got the feedback from other students, and even before they could ask, I had done it, and then it was a genuine reason. So something like that, if you can anticipate what the students want and then try to solve their problem, I don't think there will be any issues at all. So you should be always open-minded. That's what I learned. And another anecdote I would very distinctly remember is of a senior professor who came and sat in front of me and started crying. He was a very senior man, and I was really intrigued why this person is crying at this point of time. And then, sir, I'm sorry, I can't control my emotions. What happened? My daughter was doing post-graduation, has failed. So I don't know whether the system allows me to have a revaluation or anything like that. I said, why did she fail? No, she didn't fail because she was bad. She has been failed by a examiner. I said, what happened? It should not happen that way. Any examiner should be good enough to assist the student and then pass or fail, and not take any personal agendas and then fail a student. That's very wrong. Then he said, no sir, I've learnt a lesson. All my life I had been very strict. I was a strict examiner. I used to fail a lot of students. Probably many of them deserved passing, but I was very strict. I thought I expected this answer, and same thing must have happened with my daughter. Then I had no answer. I said, see, you have got the answer. You have told this thing, something like that. These are things which people learn out of their mistakes. They do the mistake, commit the mistakes when they are in the hot seat, but then realize it much later. So that's very bad. That shouldn't happen. But I told him nothing not to worry, and got a reassessment done for her daughter, and probably convinced them and counseled them, and she took the next exam and she passed. So
that was really good for that child.
Yes.
And the confidence of the child.
Exactly. The child was also there. I called her and then counseled her. She could get, because failure is not the end of it. Students always think that if I fail, that's the end of the world. No. Failure is always a stepping stone to success.
That's true. I would like to ask you another question about this happy hypoxia. As a chairman of this COVID-19 committee, what would you like to say about that?
Happy hypoxia is a situation where the SpO2 levels in blood seems to be dipping, but the person is still quite healthy. He feels healthy. He is not aware of that at all. And this especially happens in young adults, because young adults are quite active and their oxygen level dips a lot. And only when it comes down below 90, then they realize that they are breathless. So it's always better, the person who is aware that he is infected with COVID should be monitoring his SpO2 levels. A simple device like a pulse oximeter will help a lot. So they should be having it, and they should be aware of that. And this happened more significantly because in the second wave we had a lot of cases, and we pushed most of these cases to home isolation. So there it was a big issue. So the pulse oximeter was a device which was propagated, and even in fact in all the kits that they gave, pulse oximeter was given. Many of them could be saved because of this pulse oximeter, but of course many patients are not intelligent enough to recognize that. So we must have lost a few patients who could have otherwise been saved through a happy hypoxia. It could have been there.
I've always felt, as a member of the Senate for Rajiv Gandhi and subsequently as a syndicate member, I felt that sports was never given enough importance. And I think at some point of time, during your predecessors' time, etc., and they used to just say, neither was extracurricular activities given importance nor sports. What's your view on that?
Rightly pointed out, sports, culture, fine arts, literacy, literature, all these have to be given because a doctor need not be a doctor, he can be something else also.
Absolutely.
He can be a musician, he could be a singer, he could be a sports person. And I have ample examples of such things. In Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, even before I could become Vice-Chancellor, I was the Dean of Bangalore Medical College. We started the sports medicine there. In fact, of the 4 centers in India which was selected for sports medicine, BMC was one. So we established the department. Now the department is full-fledged sports medicine department with MD in sports medicine. That's one thing. And in Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, I am proud to say this is the university which has conducted 4 national athletic meets, which no other university has conducted.
Absolutely.
And we have, so that is the focus that we were giving for athletics. And very recently in my tenure, I started what is called as Pratibha Puraskara. Pratibha Puraskara is a program where I recognize students who have achieved something at state level, at national level and international level. We invited them, we gave them, we recognized them, we felicitated them, and a token of appreciation was given by university. I think this is the first time that any university has done in all this field.